Whoa! And
Man.
we are live on what is this, a Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, coming at you, Chasing Billy live with Josh Slatton and James Townsend, Cardigan Kid, the Burrito Bandit. Uh, Going to talk about some exciting things tonight. Josh, how you doing?
I'm great. First off, why do you get two cool names and I don't have any? That's the first problem we've got. But I'm good. It's spring break. Time doesn't exist. I don't know what day it is. I don't even know if it's night or day. I've only been up about an hour. So I just let's figure, let's do a live show, man.
Well, first off, what I'm going to assign the folks is we need to come up with some cool names for Josh.
Okay.
So,
all right. Let's.
Mine were all given to me by people.
Yeah.
Michael gave me the Cardigan Kid, and Cold West gave me the Bandito Burrito.
That's fair. Yeah, so I don't know. I guess there's no shortage of people that don't like me, so I need one of them to come up with something that's that's demeaning yet humorous at the same time.
Yes, I think that means we're notorious.
It does. Mario, nobody pulled your string, buddy.
DB says you can be the Waco Kid.
Waco Kid. Waco. It's a nice town. That's a nice town. No, man, really, I wanted to do another live show because we have had some stuff to go over, and we're still 2 or 3 weeks away from our usual one. So I thought we'd call an audible at the line of scrimmage, and let's do one tonight. What do you think, man?
But you know what we got? We got some breaking news.
Oh, we do. I was hoping we'd be the first to reveal this, but clearly it's already made the rounds. So we'll be a day late and $1 short. But how cool is this? I mean, I think it's cool. I know I've already gotten like 2 text messages from people bitching about it, but I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think the good thing about this is for, I don't know, the past year or more that they've been talking about Guns 3. We've had basically a concept art kind of poster that's been floating around, and some vague rumors, but it hasn't really. There hasn't been much to solidify the progression of the film,
right,
and give us hope that it's going to be made. And here we are with this announcement from the governor, from multiple pages, pictures of Emilio Estevez with all the folks. It's seems pretty guaranteed that the promise to film in New Mexico has been made, and that this thing is getting done.
Yeah, I think it's about as legit as we can get at this point in time. I also had I'm looking at it now, another friend of ours that lives in Springer, New Mexico, that sent me another post on a different news outlet confirming it. So, yeah.
And I've had a couple people send me some stuff too. I think Mario sent me one, and Sandy sent me one, and there might have been a few others. But yeah, this thing, it looks like it's happening. And we love Young Guns. We love Young Guns too. And this thing can be 100% inspired by Brushy Bill, and I'm there for it, man. No hate.
Absolutely. There's, like we said before, there's a bunch of purists that are very anti this film being made, and I just don't understand it because it's like I've said 100 times, Young Guns 2 is kind of what I view our generation's Walter Noble Burns as. It's what re-sparked everything. Billy was pretty much low-key, non-existent until 89 was the first one, I think, and then 92 was the second. So I love it. Hopefully it gets a big following, and it really boosts everything up. And let them get history wrong, and we'll come behind and we'll talk about it and we'll fix it. But man, I'm excited. I don't know how in the world they're going to write this. I mean, I've got some ideas and some thoughts, but nothing confirmed. So I'm anxious to see what the screenplay is and what the storyline is. Creative writing.
And Kathy says, aren't the Young Guns now the old guns? And yeah, if you notice, a lot of the promotional materials just calling it Guns 3. So I imagine, age is an obvious factor here. A lot of these movies, if you watch the most recent 2 Indiana Jones movies, of course, Harrison Ford's age is a subject in the movies, and they play with that. And so I imagine if they make this Guns 3, that it'll be the same kind of case. The fact that they're old now and the fact that they're past their prime is going to be part of the theme, part of the topic. But we'll have to wait and see.
And I wonder, it could be Brushy later in life. I'm assuming Emilio's playing in it. And as well as I do with AI now, you can make these guys look younger for shorter durations of film and whatnot. I just watched, was it Cobra Kai? I just finished that. And, they brought back Mr. Miyagi through a dozen different scenes. And I mean, it was all AI, but damn, it looked so realistic. So,
well, and that's like they did that with Luke Skywalker in The Mandalorian, and it was fantastic.
Yes, I forgot about that. So
it's very cool, and I'm all here for it. I was Cobra Kai. I haven't caught up yet. I haven't finished it. Do you like it? Is it good?
I've talked to some friends and people that didn't grow up like us, that aren't our age, that didn't watch it growing up. It's kind of cheesy, I'll admit. It's kind of corny, but from the nostalgic standpoint, from guys in our generation, it was just freaking great. Like, I loved every minute of it, man. It was so good.
Well, I mean, there was a theme to 80s movies. It was over the top. And I remember when I first started watching like the first season of Cobra Kai, and what's his name? Johnny LaRusso. He's driving in that red sports car, drinking with some hairband playing. It's just so over the top, and I'm like, this is what we've been missing, since it's the end of the 80s.
Yeah, it's the whole all 6 seasons is that same vibe, and Rocky and 80s hair bands, and it's great, man. I loved it. Like I said, I'll rewatch it at some point in time because it's just that nostalgic. But anyways,
yeah. So yeah, you're right.
Any news we want to cover? Anything before we kick everything off?
Do you want to talk about the meat of the topic, or you got any other items?
No, we'd gotten a couple messages and some questions real quick. I'll cover this real fast. As far as the Coalition Convention in September, as everybody probably knows by now, it's sold out, which super excited about. Never would have dreamed it would have sold out, and certainly that quick. So I'm really happy for that. We've covered it a few times, but just to remind everybody, so the ticket that you purchased online, we'll email you a digital copy probably about a month out with the itinerary for the event and some other goodies as far as sites and stuff like that. So anyways, if you did purchase a ticket online, don't freak out. Everything's recorded. We've got it documented. If there's any questions on anything at all, get with James or I and we'll confirm it. But you're good to go, and we will email everyone a digital copy about a month out for the deal. So anyways, I just want to clear up some of that confusion. As far as news wise, that's really all I've got, man. Let's dig into it.
Okay. Well, we titled this video, "Where Was Billy on July 14th, 1881?" Of course, we all know he's in Fort Sumner. I did say on Facebook that there was new evidence that he was in Hyco. And I thought about just announcing that we had finally had rock solid evidence that Brushy was Billy. There's a few people convinced that we're talking about Brushy tonight, and just to throw it in that direction. Doss already came in here with the spoilers. The results are still the same. Billy dies by Garrett's hand. I mean,
he's not
way
wrong.
to just end the party. Way to be a wet blanket, Doss. But he's right.
Right now, I'm done. I'm out.
But no, our question here is, where was Billy on July 14th in Fort Sumner? Was he at the house of Celsa Gutierrez? Was he in Pete's room? We all feel, no matter what you believe about what happened on July 14th, all of us feel like there's some discrepancies in the accounts, that sometimes we read what Pat says or what John Poe says, and we think, that doesn't, just something about that doesn't make sense. And so the question is, where was he? Where was Billy at? Was he really walking across, the whole idea, Billy would have his boots on. You wouldn't walk across that ground in New Mexico barefooted. So where was Billy on that night?
Well, I mean, that's the kicker is where was he? I think it's safe to say that, we have two options, kind of like you already laid out. He was either at Celsa's place and got up for whatever reason. Supposedly he was hungry, decided to make his way over to Pete's to cut beef, etc. And we know the rest. Or, which has kind of been the recent theory as of the last decade or so, was he already inside the house, more than likely with Paulita, and they just conspired this story of coming from Celsa's to, protect her honor and her dignity, etc. And really, I think there's some conflicting information on both. There's some good supporting arguments for both sides. I know I personally have wafted on it a few times, and I've gone back and forth on my theories and my thoughts, and I think I've changed directions again. And I think for about the 10th time, I've made up my mind on what I think happened that night. And I think you did too, if our side conversations are correct.
Yeah, and this is funny because it involves aspects of that night that knew the whole time.
Hmm.
There was no new information acquired, but sometimes when
Right.
you're talking with folks and just speculating and having a good time, something's presented in a way that like just clicks and you're like,
Exactly.
"Oh my god, this makes sense." And
Right.
I was
Exactly.
talking with Mel Hubner, and of course she was instrumental in a lot of the map illustrations in your Poe book, and
Right.
she's got a map in the Coalition Journal that just came out.
Hmm.
Really good illustrations she's working on. We're talking about the night of July 14th, and she just says, I think that Billy was in Paulita's room, and I'm like, that would make sense actually, because thinking back, you know, did Pete's room have an inside door? Was
Hmm.
there a door in Pete's house where you could walk down the hallway of the house and go into Pete's bedroom?
Uh, so the confusion here, and hopefully I can kind of lay this out a little bit better and explain it, was at one point in time, yes, there was. So you can pull up the old, and I'm going to guess on the dates here, but the old post maps that were located at the Library of Congress, and it shows a doorway leading into the hall when it was the old officers' quarters. I'm going to guess that date's probably about 1865. I think the fort closed in 68. And again, I could be wrong on a year or two, but either way. So at that point in time, there was. But the kicker is we know there was some remodeling done in the house or for the house. We know a second story was added. We know an exterior door from Maxwell's bedroom to outside was added. So the thing we need to figure out is, was there an interior door as well?
Uh-huh.
Well, there's two diagrams. We're not talking about the one that Mel came up with that we'll show here in a minute, but there are two other diagrams, and I put both of them in the Poe book. And one was drawn, and I feel like we showed them on the show before, but if not, let's talk about them again. One was drawn by either Garrett or Maxwell as soon as they got to Las Vegas the following day, and was in the Las Vegas Gazette, I believe. And it diagrammed the room to a T, even showing where the bed was, where the window was, et cetera, et cetera. Funny thing is it said there was no door leading from the inside of Maxwell's house, or I'm sorry, the inside of Maxwell's bedroom into the hallway. So again, that's key. There was no doorway to where you could access Maxwell's bedroom any way other than coming from the outside. So we've got that map, which is pretty telling. Well, then if you start digging through, and we're digging through the Robert Mullen files, and I'm not the first one to find this, of course, but when going through those files, there's another illustration of Maxwell's bedroom, and it was drawn by Walter Noble Burns when he was doing the research for his book, and it was based off of interviews with the old timers that still lived in Fort Sumner that had actually been inside the Maxwell's house and were familiar with it. Well, the cool thing about that map is it's drawn almost identical to the one that Pete or Garrett drew. And it also shows that there's no doorway leading into the hallway from the inside of Maxwell's bedroom. So we've got two maps independently that say the only way to get in and out of that bedroom were to come in from the outside on the porch, which is the way that we know Billy made entry supposedly into the bedroom. So with that in mind, I think we can say that it's probably very safe to say that on July 14th, 1881, the only way to enter Maxwell's bedroom was through that exterior door. That was the only entry point and the only exit point, minus the windows, of course. So with that in mind, let's bring in the kind of the concept that you came up with and you thought of, and we had Mel draw out and illustrate for us. kind of giving maybe a little bit better idea of what happened. And it kind of ties in the whole stocking feet discussion because, like so many others, I've also questioned, having been and grown up in New Mexico and living in the Panhandle, I can attest that the last thing I want to do is walk across a parade ground in barefooted or in socks. That sounds absolutely horrible.
Right.
So with that in mind, let's put up, if you're ready for it, let's put up the diagram that Mel did, and then we'll kind of walk through and kind of lay out what we think makes more sense. And then I can follow it up.
I do want to say that, like, a lot of my approach to theories and stuff around this has been, I don't typically like the whole, well, that doesn't make sense approach, because, when you're not there and you're not cognizant of all the factors that go into it's kind of dangerous to say, well, it just doesn't make sense. Excuse me. It's not logical. So this is what I'm going to think, because maybe they kept the street clear, things like that. But given that, this theory did make a lot of things click. And like you said, the stocking feet thing. If Garrett and Poe are going to write anything and have Billy come in from somewhere else, they're going to logically, my question was always like, why would they take his boots off and have him walk barefoot if he wasn't really barefoot? Because if they lied and said he had his boots on or something, that's something residents who knew what happened would take umbrage with and say, no, it's not. He had his boots off. So the whole having your boots off thing seemed like a fact that Garrett and Poe could never get around. So it was like, we have to kind of acknowledge that. This idea, given the fact that there was no inner doorway into Pete's room, if Billy was coming from Paulita's bedroom, that part clicked. And the other objection of like, why, Poe and McKinney, their boss just walked into Pete's bedroom, and some unidentified resident comes walking down barefoot with a butcher knife and then jumps back and pulls a gun and starts saying, like, who are you guys, in English or Spanish. They're going to let him just walk in to Pete's bedroom, and the whole time they're going to be saying, hey, we're friends. Why would they do that? This is an unidentified guy who came from somewhere else. But that changes when you think, if Billy came out, he left Paulita's room, he's heading towards Pete's to ask about the beef. He comes out onto the porch. In Poe and McKinney's minds, this guy is already a resident of Maxwell's house. That's why they're saying, we're friends. Pat's here to talk to Pete. Don't worry about it. They're not put off guard by him because he's part of the household. He's come out of that door. So that like clicked off another thing. So yeah, I'll bring up the image now. Those two things are always like the main objectives in my logic pursuit.
No, exactly. Because keep in mind, not only does it seem odd that they would have allowed this guy to pass by them coming from an outside source, like, a bunch of houses down or whatever. But we also have to keep in mind that they're at Fort Sumner that night specifically because they're looking for a young white man that they don't recognize. And a young white man that they don't recognize walks up on the porch, yet they just don't think to stop him, question him, or anything else.
Right.
So you're right. Just to kind of hammer that home, it even raises more suspicion when you consider the fact that they're literally there looking for someone that they don't have a good ID on. To then let that unknown person pass by them, it just seems ridiculous. So So anyways, this is to kind of walk everyone through what we were talking about. As you can see, this is Paulita's bedroom, which was on the right side there. Now, again, originally, if you've looked at the old diagram, directly across from Paulita's bedroom door, there used to be a door that would have led into Pete's room or the officer's quarters. That, I think we've said is fair to say, has been cut off now, and the only entry point is in and out of Pete's. So in theory, let's just say Billy is in there with Paulita, which has been speculated. Something drives him to walk out of that bedroom, down the hall, outside, and around the corner into Pete's bedroom, whether it was hungry, whether it was, hey, he heard talking.
Hearing voices.
Reasoning.
Yeah.
So because of that, man, when Mel drew this diagram up, it really just kind of hit me, like you were saying. This would make absolute perfect sense why he was still barefoot at this time. Because again, if you're coming from Celsa's place, that's, if everybody remembers when we did the tour there a year or so back, that's a good ways away. I mean, it just, despite the fact that it's illogical to walk across the ground barefooted, why also would you walk 75 to 100 yards away outside and not put on shoes? I wouldn't do that today on a sidewalk. So I don't know, man. When I saw this diagram, it just clicked to me, and it just makes absolute perfect sense. But that's just
Yeah. And I agree. And I think right now this is where I'm landing most certainly on this theory. And again, we could be wrong. We weren't there, but it makes sense of the stocking feet argument. It makes sense of why Poe and McKinney let a man pass their guard into a bedroom where Pat was. This is somebody who lives there. They're going to talk to Pete. They're not going to stop him. It just all checks out. Now, there are a couple questions that you need to follow up with, and I think one of those is why would everybody in the Fort Sumner area and the Maxwells and the Gutierrezes, why would everybody be cool with Pat and Poe attributing the romance or the visitation to Celsa when it was really Paulita? Of course, I don't think Poe or Garrett ever said it was romantic. They just said Billy was over at their house. But, why is that okay as opposed to Paulita? And then, again, why even cover that up? Like, why go through the motions to alter the tale in this way? My theory is it's something, for some reason, they did not want Paulita and Billy's relationship to be known. I don't know why. It may just be a simple, hey, we respect the Maxwells. We're going to keep this under wraps because Billy's an outlaw. If you look back to Jim East, when they captured Billy at Stinking Springs, they took him into Fort Sumner. I mean, Luce Maxwell, Paulita and Pete's mother, seems totally okay with Billy and Paulita's relationship. They go over, they share a huge kiss, they want to go into the bedroom. Everybody's okay with it. It's very obvious. So why, when you get to July of 1881, do we want to hide it? Do we want to cover it up? Well, possibly this is after he's killed two
more
lawmen,
cops, right?
And I mean, there's no going back for him at this point. So maybe it's the notoriety or the disgrace involved. But a big aspect of this to me, and I couldn't find the newspaper article that I'm referencing before the show, but I will find it and I'll post it, is later in like the 40s or 50s, there's a woman who's giving an interview to a newspaper, and she's saying that, John Poe was a family friend, and Poe was visiting with her husband, and she overheard this conversation with Poe and her husband. And this is very anecdotal, and I acknowledge that, and this is not, documentable at any rate, but she overhears Poe talking with the husband, and the husband kind of in a conversational manner is like, come on, Poe, tell us what really happened. We all kind of feel things are kind of weird. What really happened that night? And she said that she overheard Poe tell her husband, it happened the way it did, but we just we changed what we had to change to protect the integrity of a woman. And so that kind of had the ring of believability to me, because like, if you're going to tell a tall tale or lie, you would go bigger than that. And again, I'll have to find the source, and we'll look at it.
Yeah,
in the full light. Yeah. So if that's the case, it makes sense. So for whatever reason, they were trying to protect Paulita's integrity. I don't know, but I do know that, even up to the 30s, when she's talking with Walter Noble Burns, they're still tight-lipped about it. Paulita will never admit to any of this. So whatever it was
Mhm.
drilled home to Paulita, like, you don't talk about this. What do you think about that? Why do you think Paulita and Billy were kept under wraps like that, man?
That's a great point. Well, we have to keep in mind that I think it's fairly well accepted, and I certainly buy into the fact that the reason why Poe, Garrett, and McKinney were up there that night was because of Maxwell. I think the evidence is pretty conclusive that Maxwell's the one that got the message to them that Billy was in that area. So with that in mind, and again, we're going down speculation station here, but I believe that it's not beyond reasonability for Billy is dead on the floor, and I'm sure Pete could have just simply looked over at him and said, "Hey, you guys owe me a solid. I told you where
Yeah.
he's at." Again, it's his younger sister. I mean, you're right. Back in December when she was there, they were fine with them kissing and being intimate or whatever the warm embrace was. But that was also two cops before he killed two more lawmen. So, and we don't know how that went. I mean, they may have caught a lot of flack from the community after that incident where they kissed in the bedroom. We don't know exactly how that was perceived by the community at that time. But when you look at the Hispanic culture at the time, the fact that Pete Maxwell, the Maxwells in general, because again, he's still living off his father's legacy at that point in time. Lucian had only been dead maybe a decade or so. So it seems very possible or very logical to me that they would have wanted to have protected her integrity. And had that, and again, this is just me thinking, but trying to rationalize through this, had that not been the case, I don't know why Paulita would have been so adamant to stick with the story, like you said later in life, that there was nothing between them. What does it matter at that point in time?
Right.
So again, a bunch of things that we don't know for sure, but it makes a lot of sense to me to assume that they would not have wanted to make it known that Billy was there in the house with her. To me, it just doesn't, it doesn't add up that, I'm sorry, I said that wrong. It doesn't make sense why they would want to make that publicly known. So,
I I will add too that another factor that I think we also too often presuppose in this is that Billy and Paulita were mutually in love, and I think some things that I've kind of come at a different angle show me that maybe Paulita wasn't as invested in this as Billy. And for example, when Henry Hoyt, this is another aspect too. Dr. Hoyt was persuaded to leave Paulita out of it, and I'll tell you why. That's definitely verifiable because before Dr. Hoyt wrote his memoir in 1929 called Frontier Doctor, he contributed to a couple newspapers and wrote some articles about his life on the frontier. So in one of these, he talks about arriving in Fort Sumner. This is way before he went to Tesco, so this is before he met Billy. So they arrive in Fort Sumner. He talks about how the Maxwells are like the feudal lords of that place, and he talks about Paulita, and he says this Fort Sumner Lolita is walking around in these fancy silk dresses, parading herself in front of like all the people he's come with. He's arrived with a bunch of people. There may even be soldiers. I can't remember, but she's like making a big deal about like, look at me. And he even says like she changes dresses. She'll go inside and she'll put on a new dress and come out, parade around again. And he was like, she was a trip. So they leave. He goes and meets Billy, and he's like, I gave Billy a watch, and he was going to make a gift to this woman, this same girl who was parading around back then. And he was like, by the way, this same girl's the one he had a relationship with that got him killed. And then and he says Paulita, and he names her and everything. And by the time he's written his book, no mention of her at all. He just says Fort Sumner Lolita. He keeps it anonymous. He keeps it, leaves her name out of it. And this is 1929, around the same time as Walter Burns. Right. He's not mentioning her. So they did not want this out. Right. But the character of Paulita, and this is the same. I know people grieve different. I know people act different. You can't really use this as a final judgment, but they say when Paulita viewed Billy's body, she was just like emotionless, just like cold, didn't seem to care. And then later on, Pete dares her to steal the marker at his grave, and they're talking about it being haunted and everything. And Paulita has no problem running out to Billy's gravesite, taking the marker, running inside with it, playing, haunted house games with this grave,
Right.
and very disrespectful. And it doesn't seem like a woman who thought that this outlaw was her soulmate. This is not how she would think. Again, this is all speculation, but those few things lead me to think I don't think Paulita cared as much about Billy as Billy cared about Paulita. And that could be another aspect to all this. Maybe
Right.
Paulita was like, don't tell anybody that we were connected. I don't want him connected with me. I'll never get married. Who would marry me if I was shacked up with Billy the Kid, an outlaw, who at that time was not a folk hero? At that time, he was like, Ted Bundy or something like that. It was like, we don't want to be associated with him. So that's something else to consider.
Yeah, it wouldn't be the first time in history where a guy thought more of a girl than a girl thought of the guy. So, I mean, that's possible. But I've also thought why, whether she thought Billy was her soulmate or not, I think it's very safe to say that they were clearly an item maybe, or had feelings for one another. The depths of them, it's hard to say, but I think it's really solid to come to the conclusion that they were somewhat of an item.
Right.
I think further evidence is the letters that were exchanged between her and him when he was in jail in Mesilla. The sheriff of Mesilla, his name escapes me right now, notified Garrett, hey, he's writing, basically him and a girl in Fort Sumner. He may even name her. I don't remember at this time. But because of that, we know they were an item. We know that's why he went back up there. So think about this. Why, considering all that, why would Billy not be with Paulita that night? Why would he be staying, if he's hiding from Garrett, why would he be staying at Garrett's, what was it, brother-in-law or sister-in-law? Right. Yeah. Why would he be staying
true too. Yeah.
at that house? Why his girlfriend, who he clearly loves based on those letters, who he risked his life to come back up to, is sleeping alone in a bed 75 yards away? That makes no sense. I don't know a 21-year-old male on the planet that would be content sleeping 75 yards away from his sweetheart. So, I mean, now, why wouldn't he be in the bedroom?
That's a very good point. And again, I was going to say something, but I completely forgot what it was. But Paul Murphy, makes a good point, and it's something I think deserves to be revisited, is who walls off interior doors to bedrooms. It gets cold in New Mexico. I don't buy that the only door is an exterior door. It doesn't. And this is one of those things where it would have never even occurred to me to think that there was no interior door except for, diagrams that seem to have some historical integrity to them.
Yeah. And I was reading those comments. I was going to touch on that too, because I agree. I mean, it does seem odd. Why would you wall off a door? But again, the two diagrams are very detailed. I didn't think to have them ready ahead of time, or we could have shared them. But, both of them, again, they show windows, they show doors, they show a fireplace. I believe they even show where the bed was positioned at. So
and they show like a cabinet, cabinet area,
why exactly you're going to show that much detail but not show where a freaking door was? It just makes no sense. But even, let's just say for argument's sake that the door was there, that doesn't throw out the theory that Billy didn't walk out of Paulita's bedroom and walk around like we showed in the diagram. Maybe the interior door was locked. Maybe he thought it was too risky or too inappropriate to come in through Pete's closed bedroom door, so he went around outside. I don't know. I mean, again, there could be 1,000 reasons to explain things, and who knows what it is. So I don't believe there was an interior door because both diagrams say otherwise. The logic of closing it off doesn't escape me, because you're right, it does get cold, and that would force him to walk outside to do something. But I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah,
but I think
in every one of these instances, it's like we got to play that logic versus what evidence do we have game. And it's like I land on the no interior door side simply because I trust these diagrams right now. And if that changes, then I'll change accordingly. That's the brilliant part of being committed to history.
Right.
But I also think it's funny that it's kind of a tell that as they come to Las Vegas after Billy's been shot. There's Garrett and Maxwell and everything, and they're talking to reporters, and Garrett's, everybody's like, Pat, tell us what happens. And Pat's like, look, Maxwell wasn't helping the kid. Hey, look,
right.
nobody was doing anything at Maxwell's. Like, he volunteers information that's like, hey, let's leave Maxwell out of it. It's like, okay, weren't none of us asking about Maxwell, but okay.
Pete was like, "Play it cool, dude. Shut up."
Yeah. Yeah, but that's another aspect of the whole, like, we want to keep Paulita out of this kind of thing. Boy, what would it have been like to read those letters? Wouldn't it be cool to have those letters that Billy and Paulita exchanged?
That would be great. I would love to know what happened to them. I mean, they would have been in Billy's property, of course, when in jail in Mesilla. Of course, he traveled back. I don't know. That's a great question. I mean, I would have thought, especially back then, I mean, love letters or letters in general were coveted and were very prized possessions. So I doubt he would have gotten rid of them. So, who knows? I mean, they could have been in a saddlebag that was with whatever property he had left sitting in in the livery stable or who knows where. And they could have just got shit canned. Paulita could have destroyed them if she was genuinely concerned with her reputation.
Wow.
She could have destroyed the letters.
Could you imagine?
No.
Yeah.
I don't know if this really ties in specifically to Paulita, but it could. Something else that jumped out at me the other day. You kind of mentioned it earlier, but sometimes, that's why it's good to discuss these things, because you talk about the same thing over and over again, and you think you know everything about it, and then somebody presents something to you in a different light. And I'm helping this guy with a historical project of his, and I'm kind of giving him some consulting advice on getting some things right. So I'm telling him, and he's asking me information about, hey, tell me exactly what you believe happened that night. So I'm walking him through the story of, basically starting at the peach orchard and working up to Delavina coming in and, seeing him dead. We're kind of going over that in great detail. And again, this guy, his knowledge on Billy is very, very, very limited. So I'm telling him this whole story, and all this is pretty much brand new information to him. And I tell them the whole story, and I cover, hey, and they're in the peach orchard, they're scouting out over the town, they're kind of looking to see if anything's suspicious, etc. Then I say, hey, they actually see some shadowy figures off in the distance. The implication is that they're fooling around, having sex, making out, whatever. The shadowy figures stand up, and there's some giggling and some whispering that they can't hear, and they disappear into the night. So I tell him all this whole story, and then I hang up the phone with him, and he calls me back like 20 seconds later. I'm like, hey man, what's up? He's like, hey, I've got a question for you. And I'm like, yeah, what's that? And he goes, if they're and this really hit hard. He goes, if they're in Fort Sumner looking for Billy, right? I'm like, yeah. And they're like, they're in the peach orchard scouting out the town looking for Billy, right? I'm like, yes. He's like, then why in the hell didn't they stop these two shadowy figures doing something right in front of them that they couldn't identify? And I was just like, well, shit. I didn't have an answer. In the 25 years that I've, been reading this and obsessed with it, I've heard that story and read it a million times, like we all have. And not one time did I stop and say, well, you're right. I told him, I said, man, I don't know. I said, I don't know. That's a great question. I said, I don't know. So to tie that around to kind of what we're talking about here, maybe they didn't see that figure. Maybe that was something else that was added to this narrative after it was all said and done to try and take the heat off of Paulita and put it on Billy and somebody else. Because the implication afterwards, I think Garrett references, or maybe Poe both, say, it was assumed afterwards that was Billy in the orchard with a young lady or something. Well, maybe that never happened, which is why they wouldn't have done something stupid like not investigate it. And maybe that was just an additive to fade the heat off of Paulita. Just a speculation. I don't know. It is a great question. If they genuinely did see that shadowy figure that they couldn't identify, why didn't they go investigate it? I mean, why are you even there? So going by that story, you've seen a shadowy figure in an orchard and a dude walk by you, and 2 times an unknown male walks by you and you don't stop to ask him who he is. Either y'all are covering your asses and trying to make up a story, or you are literally the worst detectives I've ever seen on the planet. So anyways.
Well, maybe so. The whole orchard scenario, that whole segment of the narrative has always been mysterious to me. It's a lot like, uh, I not to bring religion in this, but if you read the Gospel of Mark, there's that section like the Romans come to arrest Jesus and they try to capture this dude. They grab his robe and he runs away naked. And then like they're like, okay, and then they arrest Jesus, and you're like, what? What does that have to do with like why are we talking about this? That's kind of how the peach orchard scene comes in. Like I'm like, why are you even bringing this up? It's like
Good point.
I think it's telling when they bring up stuff like that that doesn't have any bearing on the narrative. It
You're
kind
right.
of might show what they're trying to deflect off of.
Exactly. Too much information. And that's when you're, as an officer, as a cop, when you're interviewing somebody and you're questioning them, that's kind of one of the things you look for, of course. And this is, police investigation 101 here, interrogation 101 here. But the more details you get from someone, usually the more they're lying. Because if I ask you, James, what did you have for dinner tonight? And you say I had chicken fried steak, I'd probably believe it. But if you start telling me, how you mixed up the gravy by hand, I might start questioning it. So, yeah, you're right. It's too much information. And it also, if you want to assume that's correct, and let's just say they saw Billy in the peach orchard. So what, Billy gets up in the peach orchard. And if you're familiar with the layout of Fort Sumner, you would have had to have bypassed the Maxwell residence to get to the Celso Gutierrez residence to then turn right back around and come right back, all within a span of probably 20 minutes, maybe even less. So just from a geographic standpoint, it doesn't make a lot of sense why Billy would have been in the orchard, then at Celso's, and then back at Pete's. It just doesn't make sense. Sorry, I'm getting a lot of comments, and I'm skipping over all of them.
Well, I thought it might be a good idea to just cycle through some ones that really stuck out to me, just to kind of get the commenters focused on certain discussion points, and to point out to viewers like, hey, these are good points. Rufus, thanks for tuning in, man. Hope you're doing well. Sorry I disappointed with the Heiko comment. Built you up to something, you were expecting something different. But he says Jesus Silva in one testimony said Billy walked all through the house before coming into Pete's bedroom. So definitely odd. Yeah, Jesus Silva, I think he threw a lot of mud in the water,
Man, he did. I tried to just dissect a lot of his stuff to add to get a little bit of a consistent theme when working on the Poe deal. But unfortunately, he freaking changes his story so many times. I mean, there's one account where he's sitting, by the orchard where the irrigation ditch is, and he says he's drinking a beer with Billy. And then, he walks through the house. And then if you look at the details of his involvement after Billy's death, I mean, you've got one count where he picks him up off the floor and takes him into a back room and lays him out there. He gets the weapon wrong. I think he says Garrett shot him with a Winchester. I mean, as much as I like to thank Jesus for, his firsthand narrative of the event, it's just everywhere. And it's hard to really come away with what was true and what was not. At least from him anyways.
Mario says, did the whole town turn on Billy because he killed Bell and Ollinger? And I think, we really have to consider, I know everybody loved Billy. Like, I'm not one of those people who thinks he was a horrible, evil killer. Like, there were a lot of people who really liked Billy. But I think there were a lot of people that were afraid of Billy too. And I don't think he was an outlaw for no reason. Like, this is a guy who chose the life he lived. He chose to be a rustler. He chose to be a cattle thief. He had no qualms with ambushing Brady and Roberts. Like he was okay with just about everything he did. So in that line of work, you had to be rough. You had to hold your own. And this was a kid who was capable of holding his own among older and meaner men. So, like, to some extent, I think we have to admit that as likable as he was and as charming and charismatic as he was, in some respects, you have folks like Garrett, who a lot of people say you can't trust, but other people said the same thing, that when he was mad, and you had to look out. And I think we have to consider that as a possibility, that it's not so much maybe the town didn't turn on him so much as like sometimes they were legitimately scared of this guy, and maybe that had something to do with it. Especially Mario, you're right. After killing Bell and Ollinger, it was a game changer for sure. Like there's no you couldn't like hide him and explain it away now. It's like, look, he killed two guards, deputy U.S. Marshal. He was going to be hanged. He was found guilty in court. Like, you're harboring a fugitive kind of thing. Like, there's no helping him and explaining it away at this point. Like, he's bad news. And yeah, I think that many were scared of him.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know if the town would necessarily turned on him as in, this is just over the line and we can't abide by this. I think there was still a very healthy dislike for, Anglos in that part of the country at that time. And I don't personally feel that they maybe judged him harshly for that. But I do agree that I think there was a definite fear. I say definite, but there were certainly people in the community that probably feared him. You saw that before with Wayne Brazil, or not Wayne Brazil, but Brazil and Wilcox. You saw that with them. Barney Mason, of course, was scared to death of him at that point in time. So there was probably a healthy fear of crossing him, whether or not they just all of a sudden didn't like him anymore. Or he lost followers based on those acts. I don't know. I don't personally think that would have turned the tide much, but you never know. But again, even if so, I don't know how that would have played too much into the events of that night. I think it's all going to rest on Pete Maxwell and why he wanted Billy gone, which I think we can all agree that it was just bad for business, whether it be personal with his sister or just business in general. So there's reasons why Pete would have definitely wanted him gone. If the rest of the community felt that way, I'm not sure. I don't know any reason why they would, but maybe so.
Man, is the sun setting at your house right now? It just like this cool orange glow just kind of cast back there next to Billy. I thought that was pretty cool.
The window's over this direction, and it's slowly turning to night. It's
pretty cool. Yeah. I kind of agree with Rufus here that I think a lot of people feared Billy. I mean, you kind of like, it's kind of like having that friend who when he gets drunk, you don't want to deal with him. It's just like, oh, okay, here he goes. You have to like start accommodating. And I feel like Billy was a great guy. You liked him. He had charisma. He joked. He treated you right. But like, if he needed a horse, he'd take your horse. Or like, if he needed ammo and you had a store and he didn't have money, he'd take the ammo. And I feel personally like he was a guy who would 9 times out of 10 pay you back at some point if he could. But you didn't always know that probably. And so like, I feel like there was some stress to harboring Billy or to, accommodating his presence to where it was like, this guy's nice, but he's also an outlaw and he needs to do what he needs to do. And I don't have a choice if I want to live to say no. Like, I have to be like, here, Billy, whatever you want. And so I'm sure there was some anxiety around that, some fear around that.
Absolutely. There's a couple examples of people that were, pillars of the community back then that did speak well of Billy. You can see of his dealings in and around Anton Chico and Porta de Luna, where he was liked and tolerated. But as soon as they got a chance, they also helped support the Texas Panhandle and Garrett and Stewart in rounding up Billy because, hey, we like the guy. He's a nice guy, but he also steals shit from us. And,
Yeah. So I feel like Jesus Silva, Paco Anaya, I feel like all of his quote friends after he was killed breathed a little easier and didn't really lament his passing a lot. And then as the decades passed and people started coming around and ask questions and it turned into more of a sideshow, all of a sudden they're his best friends again. That's just how I feel. That's how it goes a lot of the times. But I don't think a lot of his friends were too sad to see him go at the time. Law and order was welcomed by and large by most people in New Mexico as all that stuff settled down. And go ahead.
No, I'll just say an example of that to kind of support that is the fact that, from 1881 to 1925-ish, until Burns came along, Billy was done. He wasn't talked about. He wasn't celebrated. He wasn't loved. He wasn't anything, minus the, 2 or 3 loyals, Delavina, stuff like that. It wasn't until he became popular again with Burns's book that all of a sudden everybody loves him and everybody wants to talk about him. I mean, you can even look at a good example to even further support that is you have Poe's account. Account came out in 1917 and then again in 1919. There was no love affair for Billy after Poe's account came out.
Right.
But it wasn't until Burns's came out and he was spun into this folk hero type Robin Hood of the West, larger than life figure. And now all of a sudden everybody loves him. We've all read, Toro's book on the kid, or what's another one, The Hispanic Connection, or They Knew Billy the Kid. I'm sorry. And, he had like 45 best friends. Everybody was his best friend. But it's just funny that they were never his best friend prior to Burns coming out and spinning this larger than life folk hero. So,
Iowa Joe makes a good point that they, when Billy was in town, it wasn't just all about what he brought to the table. You knew there was a good chance there was a posse after him. Somebody was looking for him. There was a good chance there was going to be some kind of gunplay. I mean, I'm sure you're he shows up. You're just stressed out about what's coming,
Well, yeah, because, you're on the hook for that. If Billy, if you're holding Billy in your house and they kick in the door, you're on the hook for that. So, absolutely, I agree with you. There was probably not a lot of, we know everybody was mad, according to Poe and Garrett at the time. The whole town was in arms about it, et cetera, et cetera. But I think it's also, and here we're going to get off on another thing as we're running out of time. But tell me if you can give me another source than this. You have the account of they held up inside Maxwell's house that night, and they even go so far to say if there was a leader amongst them, we would have been attacked, etc. Right. But I don't recall reading that anywhere other than in Poe and Garrett's account, which sounds rather heroic. That's their own little Alamo, so to speak. There, and they they were in so grave danger that they had to fortify the house and wait till daylight, etc., from the angry mob. Well, there's a lot of, I say a lot, but there's certainly half a dozen to a dozen other accounts of that night where that's never talked about or mentioned. So, maybe the town wasn't upset as about it as Poe and Garrett like it to sound.
Well, there's a whole lot more we could talk about on this subject. I know Mario asked, do you think he had a gun on him going into Pete's room? And all these angles, and I'm sure we'll revisit a ton of them, but like you said, we're running out of time, and there's just a couple small things we want to talk about before we end. So just to get those out of the way, we'll wrap this up. Again, we definitely, at this point, barring further evidence, think that Billy was in Paulita's room and came out. And we're not saying, hey, this is what you think. You have to think if you want to be a historian, blah, blah, blah. We're the same as everybody else. We just love to speculate and have fun. And that's where we land. And it's kind of a cool, eye-opening experience for us. And we hope that this conversation helped you out, one way or the other, whether you agree with us or not. Moving along, we thought we would talk about, maybe every time we got together, talk about a book we've read recently and what we thought of it and everything. And I just recently finished Maurice Fulton's History of the Lincoln County War. And this Maurice Fulton, he passed away in 1955, Maurice Garland Fulton. And this book was unfinished when he passed away. And Robert Mullen, the well-known Billy the Kid historian, kind of edited it. What a weird combo of words. He put it together for him and made it look good and finished it out. And I gotta say, man, I know you've read this, Josh. I know a lot of folks who watch have read it. It's probably become one of my favorites.
Yep.
Oh, is that an earlier version you've got there? That looks cool.
Yeah, this is the I think 65 is when it came out. It's a first edition. This is one of the first to get it without the glare. This is one of the first Billy the Kid books I had. This is probably the third or fourth one in my collection. So I've had this one a long, long time.
Does that say beef on it?
It does. It says government contract beef. Again, sorry, the light's not going to allow me to see it, but yeah, it's a sign that says government contract beef, and the shadow is of a guy drawing his gun down. Sorry, the light's not really allowing it, but But yeah, and just as edited by Robert Mullen on the bottom, like you were saying. So yeah, that book
Yeah.
actually didn't come out till a decade after Fulton had passed. So I didn't list it. I don't know about you. I didn't put it in my top 5 Billy books when we did the review before, mostly because I was trying to stick to specifically Billy, and this is more of a Lincoln County War, Lincoln County history type
Yeah.
book. But yeah, it's
I didn't
amazing.
put it in because I hadn't read it yet. So now that I have, it's. I mean, it's up there for me.
Right. Fulton did the intro on Poe's book in the 1932 edition. And when I was going through all that, I left it in. I decided to leave it in because when I went back and read it, I mean, his history has aged incredibly well.
Wow.
Even historians as recent as like Nolan, for example, who, has only recently passed. And, Nolan was doing history up until, 10 or 15 years ago. And God rest his soul, I think we've all found mistakes, as we all make, in Nolan's work. Quite a few. I personally have not seen this in Fulton's. Not saying there's not, but his knowledge and his history has aged really, really well. And so much that we owe of knowledge of a lot of these old sites and locations and photographs that we have are all credited to Fulton when he was doing all this touring in the 20s and 30s.
Yeah.
Because, a lot of people don't even know he was living in the courthouse. He was the curator of the courthouse while he was writing this book. So, I mean, what a great inspiration to actually be in the courthouse while writing it. So, yeah, it's,
Right.
I don't know that I would put it as the number 1 Lincoln County War book as far as my choice, but it's definitely one of the top 2 or 3 and an absolute must have for anybody that doesn't have it. I guess you've got yours on Kindle, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And what I think is great about it that I really got from it is the amount of newspaper articles and firsthand sources that he quotes that just aren't, as far as I'm aware, readily available to us on digital archives and things. Like, he quoted a lot of newspapers, especially from like the Cimarron News and Press and papers like that aren't preserved on these newspaper archive sites, that were just a great alternative perspective to a lot of the Santa Fe, New Mexican, and Las Vegas optic reports that you get. You kind of get to see the other side's perspective, the McSween side's perspective, and it was really cool. And then, of course, he has a lot of quoted sections where he's like, "Hey, I talked to Sue McSween about this, and she said," and or I talked to this person and they said, and it's like, man, this guy was doing his research when these folks were still alive, and he really got a lot of valuable information and got it down for us to review and to read, and he preserved it for history, which is cool. I do have to ask, do you think he made the bullet hole in the courthouse?
I don't think so. I don't have anything to say one way or the other. I'm trying to remember, in Billy Roberts' book on the courthouse, he does a pretty lengthy, really good article on that, and he talks about it. I know that we can date the bullet hole back to about the 1920s. I don't know. I think it's a little odd. Fulton didn't seem to have that personality from what I do know about him.
Exactly.
He was out there to fabricate history.
Yeah.
I think he was just there reporting it. So to deface property like that and to make something that's such a blatant lie like that, I think is a little over the top. I don't think the bullet hole's legit, but I don't think Fulton would do that.
Have you heard people say that was him that did it?
Yeah, I've read that several times, and I don't know what the original source was for that, but yeah, I've certainly come across that several times. That Fulton did it.
I've heard it. Yeah, but then as you read this and you see the passion that he has for history, you're like, it doesn't square. Like, I don't see this same person firing a shot into the wall to attract tourists, because doesn't seem like that's the kind of guy he was.
No, we've got other people in Lincoln County that like messing with stuff in the courthouse. I don't think Fulton would have done that. So,
but yeah, I mean, that's the best I can do on that is recommend this book because of the sources he quotes, the people he interviews, and it's just comprehensive on the Lincoln County War. And like you said, I can't find any huge deviations from what we've discovered since that make it obsolete. and I really enjoyed it. Really, really enjoyed it. One thing I saw in this was a picture that if I had seen this picture of Pat Garrett before, I don't remember it. So as
Mhm.
far as I know, it's the first time I've ever seen this pic of Pat, and it's like, hey, it's
Yeah.
always a pleasant surprise when you come across a picture of someone you've never seen before in this drama. So that
Yeah,
was
and some of
cool.
these yeah, and some of these older books that were written around that have photos that have just not made it into newer editions, so that is a really cool photo. Um, on that note, one thing that Fulton did get wrong that affected some of our research is Fulton claimed to have been at the Coyote Springs site, and he even
Right.
shares a picture of it. I think we even erroneously shared it in our third journal
Yeah.
after I refound the
Yeah. Like
site.
we discovered this. You discovered it real time that it got corrected real time with you as you were
Right.
presenting it.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that is one thing he did get wrong. The Coyote Springs he went to was not the same Coyote Springs. There's about four in New Mexico, and he went to the wrong one that's over by
Yeah.
Carrizozo. The mountains even match up and prove that he was wrong. So I was kind of pumped. Not that you ever want to see a legend like him be wrong, but it was kind of cool to be able to correct that and do it in real time. So, but yeah, great
Um,
book. I would definitely get it if I were y'all.
Paul and Misty and Roland, they're talking about Bad Hoss History having a video on the bullet hole wall, and that's the same. Mr. Roberts is affiliated with that, who wrote the book on the courthouse, and that's who we were talking about earlier. So it might be worth a look.
Yeah, I don't remember. I've got the book. It's just I read it right when I bought it, and I haven't looked at it again. So
Todd, thanks a lot
yeah,
for hanging around, man. Good to see
sure.
you.
Well, we're about at an hour, so I haven't eaten dinner yet, so we probably better wrap it up.
Do you want to jump to the second segment or that we're wanting to introduce, the Billy
Let's hold.
sightings?
Uh, Gosh darn it. Sure, let's do it real quick, real fast.
Look, a few people have sent this to me tonight, and a few to you. I know Sandy and Brian, and maybe some others have sent it to me. But this was posted on Cold West. No, that was posted on Cold West as a possible photo of Billy the Kid, and we thought about doing new segments because we get so many of these Billy pictures come into us that we're going to do a segment called Billy sightings. We're not going to necessarily tell you, this is definitely not Billy or anything, but we want to look at this whole photo process and talk about why this doesn't work. and I know it's fun to look at photos, but there's got to be more to it. So Josh, what do you want to say about this photo?
So the provenance on this photo allegedly is a lady that was in the James family, which with the last name of James, there's about 10 million of them. So we'll just leave it at that. But supposedly a James family member was in possession of this photo. As the story goes, kept it in their possession their entire life, kept it in a safety deposit box at a bank, and then for whatever reason decided to bring somebody else in on it and show it to them, took them to the bank, showed it to them, but claimed they didn't want to show it to anybody else because they didn't want to get robbed, but it's kept at a bank. So I don't understand that, but whatever. Point being, that's the provenance behind it is a Jesse James family member, however distant that may be, I don't know, claimed that this was Jesse James and Billy the Kid, indicating, and that's their marking, showing who's who. I mean, again, to me, I tell everybody that asks me this because I get about 5 or 10 emails a week asking to identify Billy in photos. And I tell everybody, you're never going to say it is him or it is not him based on what he looks like. That's just never going to cut it. So to me, he looks like a young guy. Sure, it looks like a young cowboy. There were only about 200,000 of them in the American West at the time. The photo of Jesse James, to me, that doesn't look anything remotely like what Jesse James looks like, but that's just my opinion. It means absolutely nothing. But more importantly, we don't have any documented reason to suspect that Jesse James and Billy the Kid were out on the range working cattle or doing whatever these guys were doing. It looks like they're mining to me. The guy is supposed to be Jesse James is with two either donkeys or burros or jackasses or whatever, because Mel's going to correct me, but they're with two, with packs on. So to me, it looks like they're mining. And I feel fairly certain that Jesse James and Billy the Kid weren't mining partners. So I don't know. Sure, anything is possible. But yeah, I've already gotten this photo sent to me from 3 different people. And in that they said this is where it came from, which they've already watermarked it. So that makes sense. So
Yeah.
is it Billy the Kid and Jesse
Well, I mean,
James?
that
Who knows?
just
But
just to get that out. I mean, yes, this has the Cold West watermark. We didn't steal it. This was sent to us. We're obviously banned from the group. So,
right.
we're only reliant on what folks send us and tell us about. And we got bombarded with it this evening, so we thought, let's start a picture series. And
Yeah.
and lots of folks sent us their pictures, and sure, we'll throw them up and talk about them. But it's like I tell folks, the burden of proof is never on everybody that's not making the claim. You bring a photo out, everybody else has to say prove it, and you have to prove it. I mean, you can't just bring it out and say, look, I know someone who knows someone and this is them.
Yeah.
If you don't have the proof, if you don't have the provenance, then nobody is expected or required to accept it as authentic. And it's just, that's how it works. And unfortunately, there's just a lot of speculation thrown around and he said, she said type stuff. But yes, this is a photo of 4 young men who are of varying small statures. That's all we can say.
It is kind of cool that people share this stuff with us, and we don't live in Lincoln
I love
County,
it.
so that's pretty neat.
Yeah, we don't even have boots on the ground, and it gets sent to us. So that's pretty neat.
This stuff,
But no, I love that people send this stuff and want to talk about it. It's fantastic. And if I think, hey, this is cool, we'll talk about it on the show, and it's just we all sit around and talk about it. I love it. I don't for a minute want people to stop sending me stuff because it's cool and I enjoy it. So
cool. Well, we'll start doing a book review and talking about photos at the end of each show to wrap it up. But yeah, this is fun.
Provided we remember to do so.
Yeah, if we can remember. This was fun. We'll try and stay on track with our first Sunday of the month like normal. We just wanted to throw this in there because it was spring break. And also, one last thing, throw in the comments or let us know, what do y'all think of this time frame? I'm not saying we're going to get off the 3:30 Sunday, but how does doing it later in the evening work for people? I know it alienates a lot of our European people just because it's too late. I get that. Sorry. We're just kind of playing with some times. That's why we purposely did this a little bit later. So shoot us in the comments. Let us know what y'all's thoughts were on the time. What else y'all want to talk about? Y'all know how to get a hold of us. Shoot us emails, messages, whatever, if there's anything else we need to cover.
And also let us know if you like the pop-up lives. I know we have the set live shows one Sunday a month. Do you guys like it when we're just like, hey, let's do a live show, and we put out maybe 8 hours advance notice, set enough time for you guys to show up and be here and hang out with us? Is that something you like to happen, or would you just want to see pre-recorded shows pop up? I enjoy the lives. I like interacting with everybody, but if it's too short a notice, too hard to get to, let us know. We will adapt to your feedback, and we appreciate y'all being here. Other than that, Josh, anything to add?
Nope, we've said it all. We've said too much. So anyways, love you guys.
I haven't said enough. That's me in the corner. Okay.
Losing my religion.
Take it easy.
I gotta go.
That's another podcast.
Another one. See you guys.
Take care, guys.